Hi there, my name is Will Faulkner. I'm a photographer based in Melbourne, Australia, and today I'm going to share with you my 10 tips for photographing Southeast Asia. So what qualifications do I have that entitle me to give you my 10 tips on photographing Southeast Asia? Well, number one, I have travelled extensively all through Southeast Asia as a solo photographer and a solo traveller through countries like Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Cambodia, and so forth. And number two, I have married into a Cambodian family. I met my Cambodian wife when travelling through Cambodia several years ago. We dated for several years and then we became married. So essentially I have married into an extended Cambodian family. So I would hope that you do give my 10 tips a bit of credit, as I'm only trying to help you in your photography journeys through Southeast Asia. Tip number one is respect the culture. Now, if you're flying into a Buddhist country like Myanmar or Cambodia, you need to show some respect, particularly if you want to walk around and take photographs. Now, you've got to remember that these countries are more conservative than most Western countries. For example, I've seen people walking around Thailand and particularly around Thailand, around Phuket and Patong, and they're wearing singlets with, the bintang beer singlets because they want to show off their tattoos, and it's hot, so they feel relaxed and they're on holiday, and that's fine in the resort. But when you walk out on the street and you're taking photographs, you need to look a bit more professional. Otherwise, people are not going to give you the time of day. They're going to think you're another stupid tourist. Now, when I go to these countries, I wear long pants and a long shirt, and the long pants you can zip off the legs at the knee. Those kind of outdoor trekking pants, that they're very, very handy. And if I'm going into a temple, I'll put the lower leg part of my pants on, I'll zip them on and go into the temple. When I come back outside, I can take them off and walk around in shorts again. But I always roll down my sleeves, and I try to, I've got forearm tattoos, and I try to cover those up because tattoos are generally frowned upon, particularly in the temple settings. You also need to take off your shoes when you go into temples, so it does pay to wear sandals or something that slips on and off pretty easily. It's a big no-no to walk into temples with your shoes on, and it's also a big no-no to sit with your feet facing the Buddha or facing the temple shrine. So be very conscious about foot etiquette in Asia. Now, another thing you need to be careful of is when respecting the culture is you need to ask permission to shoot portraits. So you can't just, you can, but it's very much frowned upon, as it is in most countries. You can't just rock up to someone, shove a camera in their face, take a photo and walk away. Try to be more respectful. Try to walk up to them, give them a smile, say, "How are you today?" and sort of point to your camera and sort of gesture like, "Can I take your photograph?" And they'll 9 times out of 10 say it's fine. But if you just point the camera in someone's face and take a photo, it's generally frowned upon. You'll generally get a harsh negative reaction. Tip number 2 is to learn a few words of the language spoken in the country that you're flying into. The words that I try and learn when flying into a new country are hello, thank you, sorry, and excuse me. Now, it's amazing how many times you can get yourself out of a jam with those few words. And even just walking up to someone in, say, Myanmar and saying Mingalabar, and Mingalabar is a sort of a greeting, sort of hello, how are you kind of thing. When you say that to someone, and I remember saying that to someone at the airport. It was a sort of a tourist desk at the airport, and I walked in and I said Mingalabar, and she was like, "Oh wow, you speak Burmese?" And I said, "No, I don't, but I've just taken the time to learn one word." And she was absolutely blown away that I'd taken the time to learn one word of Burmese before flying into Myanmar. So guys, take the time, learn a few words, particularly if you're going to a place like Vietnam, and a word you can say there is kamun, which is thank you. When someone gives you a Vietnamese sandwich, if you say kamun, which sort of says, "Oh, thanks very much," it's really it really opens up the gateways to getting some fantastic images from the local people. Now, tip number 3 is to hire a translator. This is kind of related to tip number 2, but I'll go into a bit more detail. When I was in Ho Chi Minh City, I met a local there. Her name was Van, and she spoke a bit of English, and I met her in one of the tourist areas, which was a big park. It's kind of like Central Park in Ho Chi Minh City there, and she was sort of handing out brochures, and she spoke a bit of English, and we started up a conversation, and I said, look, would you mind if I was to give you a few dollars, would you help me ask people, can I take their photograph? So she was able to walk around with me at the Ho Chi Minh Central Market there and approach the locals, and even the elderly locals, which are, really hard to get photos from. And she was able to say, look, this gentleman's a legitimate photographer. Would you mind if he took your photograph? And I didn't have to pay Van very much. I think it was a few dollars, or I bought her lunch or something like that. But we came to an agreement that she would help me over at the course of a few days, and we formed a friendship, and we remained friends on Facebook ever since. So a good way to go is, when you fly into these cities, go to the tourist destinations. So, for example, in Malaysia, it would be the Petronas Towers there. In Ho Chi Minh City, it's the Central Park. It's those kind of traditional spots. I remember another time in Hanoi in Vietnam, and it was a filthy hot day. I was walking around the lake in the middle of the city there. I think they call it Turtle Lake or something from memory. And I sat down to take a rest when I was approached by a young university student, and he asked if he could practice his English with me. And of course I agreed, and then after that I said, look, would you mind helping me to translate to the locals? Can you ask them if I can take their portrait? And we spent the afternoon walking around the lake, speaking to the locals, taking portraits, and we quickly buddied up with another couple of young kids who were happy to tag along and sort of join the fun. And afterwards we shared ice creams and took a group selfie together, and it was just the best afternoon, guys. It was a fantastic fun afternoon. So that tip is a very strong tip, guys. I highly advise you to consider getting a translator for your photography adventures through Southeast Asia. Tip number 5 is, if you take something, give something back. Now, what I mean by that is, if you want to photograph someone who works in a shop, let's say they're selling drinks and snacks, and you ask them to take their photograph, it's common courtesy to buy something from the shop owner, not just take their photograph and walk away. Now, another way to go, or even a better way to go, is to give before asking. So you might walk into a shop in Vietnam, and there might be an old lady working there. You would buy a Coca-Cola or a Fanta, and then after you've paid and you've had a short conversation, like about the weather and so forth, you say, oh, hey, by the way, I'm a photographer, would you mind if I took your photograph? Now, you'll get some amazing photographs doing it that way, giving before asking. But at the very least, if you're going to take someone's portrait photo, try to give something back. I often walk around with, well, not often, I always walk around with small change in my shirt pocket, usually the equivalent of $1 notes, or let's say somewhere in Cambodia where they have US currency, I will carry $1 US notes in my shirt pocket, separate to your wallet, because you don't want to be pulling out your wallet all the time showing people how much money you have. Just carry some small notes in your shirt pocket, and after you've taken someone's photograph, say, thank you very much, can I give you $1? Now, $1 in a lot of these countries will go a long way. So try to be reciprocal, try to give as well as taking. Tip number 6 is to live for the image. Now, when I go on these photography trips, I'm totally dedicated to photography. I mean, I'm waking up at, 2 hours before dawn, and I'm waiting for the sunrise to come up. I've got everything prepped, I'm ready to go, and I'm walking the streets, and I'll walk the streets until, the last moment of good light, and then even an hour beyond that, just to be sure. And then I'll go back and I'll rest in the afternoon, edit my photos, and I'm out there again in the evening, and then photographing all the way into the night. You need to be dedicated to get those shots, guys, and it's kind of like you kind of get into the zone. The more time you spend walking around, shooting and photographing and learning the culture and getting a feel of the vibe of the city, the better your photographs are going to be. Try to avoid slipping into that tourist culture of sitting in a bar all night, drinking cheap beer, eating cheap food, and wasting those precious golden hours. You've only got 2 golden hours every day in order to get your photographs, and when I'm traveling over there, I'm dedicated to getting photographs. I'm dedicated on the mission of getting great photographs. So what I'll do during the middle of the day is I'll have a nap in the middle of the day, I'll charge my camera gear, I'll research where I'm going next, and before you know it, it's time to shoot again, and you're out there. It's sort of the beginning of twilight, getting the evening shots. So guys, you need to be completely dedicated if you want to get those fantastic photographs. Tip number 6 is to step outside of your comfort zone. If you follow a tour group and you hang out the side of a boat and take photos of the same scenery that everyone's taken photos of, you're going to end up with the same photos that everyone else has. It's just common sense. So you'll never ever see me in a tour group with 400 other people with long lenses taking photos of the riverbank. I mean, it's just a complete waste of your time. I remember seeing a group in Canto, which is south of Ho Chi Minh City, and it's a really common tourist trap. Well, not a tourist trap, but it's just a tourist group that they try and pitch to you in Ho Chi Minh City. They say, look, we'll put you on a bus, we'll drive you down to Canto, and you can go see the floating markets. Now, people have this impression that it's going to be this majestic floating market full of colour and vibrancy and bamboo boats, handmade bamboo boats with selling fresh produce. But in reality, it's just a couple of dirty, stinking old motorboats in the middle of the Mekong, which is it's polluted and it's disgusting, and there's absolutely nothing there to photograph. But luckily, I didn't partake in that group. I went down there on a bus on my own, just on the public bus. I got some great images just sitting on the public bus. It wasn't a tourist bus. And then I hired a boat, a single boat on my own, with obviously with a driver, and I was able to photograph the driver. I was able to speak to her. I was able to learn a bit more. And I remember seeing the tourist boats floating by with all the tourists wearing these huge inflatable vests, and they all looked really disappointed that the floating markets they'd been promised really sucked. I mean, that was just terrible. But because I stepped out of my comfort zone and I took the public bus down and I researched my own boat driver, I was able to get some images after all. And another experience I had down there was when I got to Canto, I thought, you know what, I've got a few days spare. Let me go a bit further south into the Mekong Delta. And I just picked a city or a town off Google Maps, and I picked this town called Bac Liu, and I said to the local bus company, I said, look, can I have a ticket to Bac Liu? And they kind of looked at me like, what the hell do you want to go there for? And it wasn't a tourist city at all. And it was one of the best experiences I've ever had, because I was the only white guy in this province, in this area. And I had people come up to me and say, oh, where are you from? What are you doing? We don't see people here. And it was absolutely amazing. And, I got some amazing photographs in the town square there, where everyone was relaxing in the evening. And all the university kids, and the high school kids, they wanted to come up and take selfies with me, because I was the only Western guy they'd seen in that province, like, ever. And, what an experience that was, stepping outside of my comfort zone and just picking a dot on the map, finding a bus that would go there, and it was just a public bus. It cost nothing. But I remember sitting on this bus and sharing treats with the locals that we'd bought from the vendors that jump on the bus when you take a rest stop. It was just a fantastic experience. So stay away from the tourist traps. I can give you another example of that, where I wanted to photograph this place in Cambodia called Tonle Sap. And Tonle Sap is the largest lake in Southeast Asia. And I just spoke to the hotel where I was staying, and they gave me a tuk-tuk who took me to the gate, the port of Tonle Sap, and I had to pay the hotel tuk-tuk man. I had to pay the port authority for a registered tour boat, and I was completely scammed. I was scammed at all intervals of that tour, of that experience, and it ended up costing me over $100 just to float around on this boat. By the time I'd tipped everyone, and you're strongly encouraged to tip, and I only got a handful of images that I was happy with. They took me to this floating orphanage, which I later found out was a complete scam. The children aren't orphans at all. They're actually just essentially working for the local mafia, pretending to be orphans. And these images, and the whole day was kind of tainted. I came back to the hotel and I was completely pissed off that I let myself get talked into going on a traditional tourist experience. So try and stay away from that, guys. Try to walk your own path when you're over there. That is a bit harder to do if you're female. I don't advise females to wander too far off the tourist path, because you can end badly for you. You need to be able to take care of yourself if you're going to walk in the back alleys of Southeast Asia on your own. That sort of goes without saying. Tip number 7 is to carry a card with you that has all of your social handles on it, all of your social media addresses. The amount of times I was approached by people saying, hey, can I connect with you on Instagram or on Facebook or on YouTube or whatever, and I didn't have a card with me, it drove me crazy. So these days when I go photographing, I'll have cards with me in my photography bag, and I'll have cards in my wallet and cards in my pocket that I can quickly access, give to someone I'm chatting with and say, hey, connect with me on Instagram or connect with me on Facebook or whatever. These cards are not expensive to make. I think the last batch I made was about $40 Australian for 250 cards, and I carry them everywhere with me, and they've been a great addition to my photography experience. Tip number 7 is don't photograph children. Now, I'll give you an example of when I was in Ha Long, which is in the north of Vietnam, close to the Chinese border, and I was photographing the islands there. There's a whole bunch of islands in that sort of area. They're very well known, particularly around Ha Long Bay. There's a bunch of these islands. And I lined up this scene. I had a tripod, and I was shooting these islands, and there was a sort of a kids swimming area in front of the islands, and they were just kind of in the foreground of the scene. They weren't even in my frame, but because I had a long lens, a 70-200 pointed out to sea in the general direction of these kids, I was quickly approached by one of the elders of the area, and I had to talk my way out of this confrontation. And look, the way I did that was I pulled out my phone. I said, look, here's all the images I'm taking of your country, and I had these images on my phone of Ho Chi Minh City and of Hanoi and so forth. And I was able to say, look, I'm a legitimate photographer, but it did occur to me, hey, look, I've got a huge lens pointed at this kid's swimming area, and that was my bad. Now, I don't know if that experience was anything to do with my next experience, but the next day I was approached by a woman, and I was walking along the street, and she saw me with my camera, with my DSLR around my neck, and she confronted me. It was a middle-aged woman. She confronted me, she stopped me, she grabbed my camera, and she wanted to see the images. So she wrenched it away from me, and she wanted to see the images I was taking. So I can only assume that she thought I was some sort of predator stalking the area, or some sort of guy getting up to no good, some sort of Western guy. And I quickly showed her, look, here's the images I'm taking. And I even had another local who was nearby. I think he was selling ice creams or something like that on the side of the street. He jumped in and he said to her, hey, back off. This he's not causing a problem. He's not hurting anyone. But you've got to be really careful when you are photographing kids. I generally do not photograph kids at all unless I've been given permission to, and it's totally okay within the social arrangement. Tip number 9 is don't photograph politics. Now, you've got to be really careful. I'll give you an example of a story in Cambodia. There was an Australian over there in Cambodia. He was living in the country. He'd been living there many years, but he chose to fly a drone above a political rally in Phnom Penh. Now, he was thrown in jail, and he was thrown in jail for a long time. I'm not sure if he's still in jail or not, but you don't want to be thrown into a Cambodian prison, guys, for flying your drone. Now, that was an extreme situation, but I'll give you another example. When I was in Myanmar, I was photographing these old relic Victorian era buildings, and I had to be really careful because Myanmar is sort of politically unstable. You can still photograph buildings there, but you've got to be super careful not to be photographing embassies or consulates or something like that, because people just are on edge. They'll see a guy, with a long lens, a big professional camera, taking photos of government buildings, and you'll have to talk your way out of a night in jail pretty quickly. So guys, a general tip, general rule of thumb, try not to photograph government buildings unless it's obvious, like the town hall or something like that. That's totally fine. But just err on the side of caution there. So this is another case where having images on your phone will definitely help you get out of tricky situations. I would generally go back to the hotel in the middle of the day, edit my images, put them onto my phone, and I could quickly bring up an album on my iPhone and show people, how I was treating their country, what style of images I was shooting in their country, and you'll always get a very warm reaction from that. Now, my last tip for today, tip number 10, is to have insurance. Now, generally I will have two types of insurance when I go there. I'll have travel insurance, which covers all my medicals and my flights and so forth, but I'll also have my global camera insurance. Now, this covers my gear. It covers everything from your camera body to lenses, laptop, my Pelican case, all sorts of things that's covered under this one policy. And I'll put the insurance company up on screen now. It wasn't terribly expensive. It was about $400 and something for 1 year, and it's global. I can go anywhere in the world. I can lose my camera, I can lose my laptop, and all I have to do is make a claim and they'll pay it out straight away. So I hope those 10 tips have helped you learn about photography through Southeast Asia. It's a fantastic place to go for images, particularly through places like Myanmar and Cambodia. I definitely can't wait to get back there. Guys, if you have any questions at all, please reach out in the comments below and I'm happy to help you. Thanks very much. Bye.